Infinity War content? Why would I, a producer of media content on a platform monetized all but entirely based on algorithmically determined trends in popular culture, produce new material relating to the biggest movie in the world when there's minor controversies about 30-year-old cartoons to spend 3 weeks not arriving at a real conclusion about? To be honest, the real reason is within the last 2 weeks, I did 2 different reviews of the movie for Geek.com, one with spoilers, one without, and a video about the entire history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and a ranked list of every film and TV show in said universe, so forgive me if I got a little bit burned out on it. Plus, it's a pain in my reality stones to do videos for the series based on new-to-theaters movies, because there aren't a lot of clips and shows online yet to use to illustrate the visual component of these visual essays. Also, when it comes to the Marvel stuff, there's a persistent factor of wondering how much I really have to add to the given conversation. Not to put too fine a point on it, the internet has more than enough me's to last a lifetime when it comes to superhero movie discourse, and I'm finding myself a lot more interested to hear and signal boost the takes coming from critics and commentators who are not me. Do I have bigger thoughts about Black Panther? Sure. Have I had any yet that aren't being better and more authoritatively expressed by black fans, black critics, black writers, content creators, video producers, fellow filmmakers, etc.? Not as of yet, no. But in this case, I actually found something that's being really heavily talked about where I feel like there's a point people are either missing out on or not giving proper amount of consideration to. And since it requires talking spoilers, that's why we haven't run the title yet, and why, unless you're watching this like several weeks after the fact, there's probably still a redacted spoiler space in the title of the page itself. So if you still haven't seen the movie and you abhor spoilers, you need to turn back like now because they're about to hit hard and heavy and because it's the only way to get at this particular point. Savvy? Okay. At the end of Avengers Infinity War, the bad guy wins. That's also what happens in the beginning of Avengers Infinity War, as in like the very first sequence, and what happens in essentially every scene of the conflict where the main villain of the story plays a role, which is a lot of them. He wins. Thanos wins. After dozens of comic book movies that have pitched themselves, often with dubious claims to factual reality as being actually more a story about the villain than the hero, Infinity War follows through on the hype. It makes Thanos the protagonist, which is not the same thing as the hero, the good guy, or worthy of your empathy, complete with backstory, character arc, goals, obstacles, and structures the film around scene after scene of him showing up in a place where an Infinity Stone is, saying, I'm gonna get that stone, and then doing that, usually but not exclusively, by annihilating anyone who gets in his way. And at the end, he gets what he wants. Harnessing the full might of the Infinity Gauntlet, he snaps his fingers and wipes out half of all life in the universe in an instant because he believes it's the only way to avert resource drain from overpopulation. Yes, apparently after all this time, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe megastory has been building to a galactic-scale condemnation of the theories of Thomas Robert Malthus. What a time to be alive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, as a result of this, it's not just random nobodies all over the galaxy who turn to dust and blow away, it's a ton of the good guys too. Spider-Man is dead, Falcon's dead, Black Panther's dead, Bucky's dead, for real this time. Basically all of the Guardians of the Galaxy but Rocket are dead, and Gamora died way earlier, but we'll get to that, and Loki died in the first 2 minutes. Doctor Strange is dead, Nick Fury and Maria Hill are dead, Scarlet Witch is dead. Oh, also Vision and Heimdall, but they got it different from the finger snap thing, and it's implied that at least half of Xandar must have already gotten fucked up because killed half of everyone is kind of Thanos' whole thing. Just a bunch of people are fucking dead now. And we know who's responsible for this. It's Thanos, the bad guy, the villain of the piece, the one who already killed millions of people just to get what are essentially magic wishing rocks. But the entire internet has already decided that the real blame lies with one of the good guys, who is also one of the dead guys, Star-Lord. Alright, so here's the issue. Apologies for the weird use of images, the movie is still in theaters and I do what I can. In the sequence in question, Iron Man, Star-Lord, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Drax, Nebula, and Mantis are fighting Thanos on planet Titan to keep him from getting the Time Stone from Strange. Their big Hail Mary plan involves basically beating him up as a distraction so Mantis can use her mind control powers to weaken him just long enough so that the strong guys can pull the Infinity Gauntlet off his hand and take his powers away. But because Mantis also reads minds while using her empath abilities and can't help but call out what she's feeling, she inadvertently reveals that Thanos is grieving because to claim the Soul Stone, he had to kill Gamora, who is his daughter and apparently the only being he ever loved because that's how getting the Soul Stone works. Star-Lord gets angry about this, loses his cool, punches Thanos in the face, which breaks the spell so they don't get the glove, and yada yada, the rest of the movie happens. Now, sure, you're supposed to be upset that this happened. It's portrayed as one of the big tragic moments of the film's defeat being snatched from the jaws of victory by an understandable but nonetheless infuriating emotional impulse. And presumably the only reason it's not immediately followed by Star-Lord running for his damn fool life from a teammate-administered ass-kicking is because the next thing that happens to him is turning into dust and dying with the rest of them. Still, okay, narratively we're at least supposed to be disappointed, if not at least a little bit sympathetic with Star-Lord, and expect that he'll have a lot of redeeming himself to do either in Avengers 4 or Guardians 3, because nobody expects everyone to stay dead, and even if some probably do, not the main character of the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, come on. But there's an additional component to where this is also being read as a betrayal or regression of the character, taking a figure who'd attained arguably some of the most surprisingly complex depth in the Marvel Cinematic Universe canon and reducing him back down to the one-dimensional impulsive man-child from the first act of the original Guardians, because someone had to be Bill Buckner in this scene and superhero team-ups inevitably literally reduce characters down to their basic traits and catchphrases anyway, so here we are. Star-Lord blows it because he's the literalized version of how all the MCU heroes are emotionally shattered little boys hiding in grown-up sized bodies and nuts to all that heart-wrenching growing up he actually had to do in Guardians 2 because the all is lost moment wasn't going to generate itself.
The all is lost moment!
But here's the thing about that, for either level of that criticism to hold up, i.e. the in-universe way to go causing the partial death of half the universe, Peter Quill, or the textual way to go wasting that whole 2 previous movies worth of story development in Infinity War, you have to ignore the sequence that sets it up, which is kind of one of the most important sequences in the movie, maybe even more important than the ending, and also where said sequence fits into the broader meta-plan of what's going on that makes what is ostensibly, at least up until the last few minutes, another Avengers movie where Marvel characters meet up, banter between fight scenes, and visit new locations feels so weighty and bizarre. Okay, small digression here. We gotta talk about Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord's character here, and I don't want this thing to be too long or to be repeating things colleagues have said better elsewhere. So if you haven't watched LINDSAY ELLIS' video, The Complex Feels of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I recommend you either go watch it now or bookmark and watch it immediately after, because she pretty much covers a lot of what I'm about to breeze through very quickly here in bullet points in a much more meaningful fashion, in part because it's a more singularly focused piece, and also because she's better at this than I and almost everyone else in this ridiculous medium are by, like, a lot. But for now, like pretty much every hero who gets any kind of backstory in the whole Marvel cinematic thing, with the exception of Captain America, kind of, Star-Lord is a boy in a man's body trying to grow into a man in a man's body, and his particular arrested development is grounded in superhero comics' favorite masculine angst trope, survivor's guilt. But the key detail with Quill is that he's not just sad that he lost his mother, he was incapable of accepting that she was in fact lost. She was dying from cancer, she reached out for him to say goodbye, he couldn't bring himself to accept it in the moment, so he ran away into the night, and that's when Yondu abducted him. He never had to face it and spent his whole life up until the events of Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, essentially still running from it, remaining an emotional child, incapable of forming real relationships for fear of experiencing further loss, hence never opening that last present from his mom, because if he does, that means it's it and she's really truly gone, and that's the whole point of being able to endure holding an Infinity Stone by taking Gamora's hand at the end of the movie, forming a symbolic surrogate family with the other Guardians, and finally being able to open the package afterwards. He accepts the loss, big step in growing up for him. Guardians Volume 2 continues his character journey by giving him the opportunity to reject a temptation to replace his missing mother figure with a suspiciously convenient father figure, and a more complicated loss to deal with as an adult with the death of Yondu. And yeah, so after 2 Guardians movies, that's where we were with Star-Lord. Back to Infinity War. Okay, so Thanos being a very awesome and very different kind of villain for Marvel is the secret weapon for why Infinity War ends up hitting as hard as it does, even though, paradoxically, the more invested you are in the whole Marvel miasma, the more aware you are of how likely a lot of this is to be mitigated or undone. But what Marvel does better than almost anyone in Hollywood right now is keeping the audience engaged by way of complementary text and subtext, aka the journey of watching the movie is the same as the journey of being the hero of the movie. So the secret to the secret weapon is that while Thanos is scary in-universe because he can throw the Avengers off guard by freely violating the laws of Marvel reality, he's scary to the audience because he's the first Marvel villain who gets to freely violate the rules of Marvel storytelling. To wit, Avengers Infinity War is the first MCU movie where the moral physics that govern all the other movies stop applying. This is probably something that could have used a show of its own at some point, but sue me, I'm just one guy. Short version, in all the other Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, the good guys are the people with the capacity and capability to do the right thing for the right reason, and when they do that, they don't lose. They might not get the win they want, usually sure, but sometimes not, and a lot of the time the right thing explicitly means not getting or giving up what they would personally want for a higher good, but if you do what's right, there's a basic broad cosmic justice and you get it. Usually there's a symbolic component to this, and the hero has to learn some kind of lesson or grow as a character in order to unlock a specific power, tool, ability, etc. in order to get a final victory. Sometimes things lean a little on the thematic side, like how Thor gets his powers back by being willing to sacrifice himself, but it's not until he's willing to destroy his chance to see Jane Foster again that Odin finally wakes up to put everything back in its place, or how Black Panther isn't really up to defeating Killmonger until he repudiates the wrongful decisions of his father and understands he needs to be a better king than those before him. But the bottom line is, if you're the protagonist of a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie and you understand that you've learned the moral lesson the universe has attempted to teach you, and or you have stuck to or grown from that lesson in your sequel, things work out, and if you don't, they don't. Though granted, don't really only covers Civil War, i.e. Captain America tells a lie, Iron Man goes back to acting out of raw self-interest, and look at that, the Avengers broke up. But otherwise, the Avengers learn that teamwork is good, and that means they get to beat Loki. Doctor Strange learns humility, and that means he gets to save the world. Spider-Man learns the same lesson Spider-Man always learns, but also about priorities, so he defeats the Vulture and gets to keep his suit. Captain America doesn't so much learn anything as hold true to moral ideals he was seemingly born understanding in the face of pressure to compromise, so he gets to save the day, and so on, until Infinity War, which is effectively scene after scene of the good guys learning all the right lessons, making all the right moves, doing all the right things, and losing anyway. No cheating, no subversion, no subterfuge. Thanos shows up again and again, and even though the heroes continually make tactically smart decisions and emotionally difficult but morally righteous sacrifices more or less the whole way through, helping helping each other, supporting each other, passing on lessons learned, demonstrating character growth, burying hatchets, everything that's usually the Konami code for cosmic justice in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they get stomped by Thanos anyway. Sometimes because Infinity Gauntlet, other times just because. And chances are, if you've been following the arc of the MCU to this point, your brain is picking up on a subconscious, subtextual level that this is happening. He's not just breaking time and space rules, he's breaking movie rules. Right up to letting Vision and Scarlet Witch go through an entire movie of push and pull over whether to sacrifice Vision in order to save the universe, make the correct if impossible choice, and then just going, nah, I still get to win anyway, because he's got a magic button that can rewind time and do whatever he wants. Hell, he doesn't even obey the moral physics of the previous movies. Oh, hey Thor, did you just go through a whole movie about how you don't need your hammer and got to save your people? Well, you only really saved like half of them and probably need another hammer now anyway. No, not because you did anything wrong, you still did the right thing and learned the right lesson. It just doesn't matter because Thanos. Hey Black Panther, congratulations on learning that isolationism, even when informed by legitimate concerns, is ultimately self-defeating. You're gonna die now though, because believe it or not, what you went through has exactly zero bearing on the fact because Thanos. And Star-Lord, see, I didn't forget what we were supposed to be talking about here, is involved in maybe the second biggest of these screw you any sense of hope and or cosmic moral justice moments in the entire film. Around midpoint, Gamora pulls him aside and makes him promise that if Thanos gets his hand on her, he, meaning Quill, will kill her before he can take her away because she knows where the Soul Stone is and she doesn't want him to have that information. Now this would probably be a lot to ask of anyone, but for Star-Lord, it's pretty much the ultimate final test of his character in both senses of that word. Remember, he spent most of his life being driven by an all but pathological need to avoid loss, and even though he's learned to accept it to a certain extent over the course of the two Guardians movies, coming to terms with the loss of his parents is still very much working through relatively basic stuff he should have worked through as part of growing up as a child. He's come to terms with a form of loss, but it's strictly loss as experienced from the point of view as a kid. Loss that's big and harsh, but also out of your hand that just happens to you. What he's never really had to do is lose the way a grown-up does, i.e. having the choice of losing or not losing and giving something up willingly because it's right and matters more than his own pain of losing it. And given how thoroughly immature he still is, it's a fair and open question whether he's capable of making that kind of call. Because if he does, he is all grown up, and his character arc is over, at which point is there still a story for the Guardians of the Galaxy movies to tell about him. But here in Infinity War, they wind up in that situation. Gamora asks him to do the deed, they say their goodbyes and I love yous, and it's all terribly sad and well acted by Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana, and he pulls the trigger on the gun, and it doesn't matter because Thanos has the Reality Stone and turns the gun into bubbles and just takes off because, again, in this one, making the morally correct decision doesn't lead to the correct outcome or really get you anything. But here's the thing, no one but Thanos knew that was going to happen, which makes this a great, what a bastard moment on his part because he didn't need to let him pull the trigger. As far as Quill knew, the moment he pulled that trigger, she was dead. That's how they both play the scene. In other words, it's not just the bad guy got away. As a narrative screw you, it's a thematic screw you in that Star-Lord has completed his character arc. He was done. He made it. Story over. In a version of events where there was no Reality Stone, in his mind, proved himself capable of willingly letting go of someone and or something he loved because he had to and it was the right thing to do. Like, that's it. There's nowhere left for him to go after that, except now there has to be because he didn't actually go there, but he did. And he didn't. In the microsecond between pulling the trigger and seeing only bubbles, he has completed his growth into whatever a mature, grown man version of Peter Quill would be. We just don't get to see it because that growth is immediately negated and yanked away from him. So he's going through all the pain, all the hurt, the entire gamut of the emotional experience in his head. He killed her and she died. That's the psychological journey he had to complete to fire that gun, and it was all for nothing, but the trauma of going through it is still gonna be there. What's that gonna do to a person? I mean, it's all a completely unreal situation involving magical purple space monsters who can rewrite reality on the fly, so who can say, but leave them capable of perfectly rational decision-making immediately afterwards is probably not the answer, especially as it concerns the alive or not status of the person they just had to go through that about. So what we're seeing when Quill loses it and punches Thanos in that crucial moment is not someone acting out of character or regressing away from established character development, but a character adrift in the totally uncharted psychological space of having his development haphazardly ripped away from him. The only other character in this whole collective mega franchise dealing with something similar is Captain America, who's basically walking around in his own afterlife ever since being unfrozen, and Peter Quill is not Steve Rogers. Additionally, one could argue that failing through recklessness is actually in keeping with the previously outlined meta-theme of the heroes having their established moral win states negated and turned against them as well, precisely because being recklessly impulsive is typically how Star-Lord and the Guardians win in their own movies. Acting on impulse and surviving by the skin of his teeth is, prior to the discovery of his celestial origins, practically Peter Quill's official superpower. It's also what leads him into most of the decisions that end up forming the Guardians team itself in the first movie. It's a major component of how he beats Ronan, it's the whole point of the running theme about how Yondu controls the Arrow in Guardians 2, and it's the cathartic signal that he hasn't lost his essential self after all when he doesn't hesitate for even a moment to blast Ego's face off the second he reveals what really happened to his mother.
Now, alright, I know that sounds bad.
So from a certain point of view, going with his first feeling is for Star-Lord what self-sacrifice is for Captain America and humility is for Doctor Strange, the moral choice that unlocks a just victory, or at least would in any other Marvel movie.
I'm always angry.
But not in Infinity War. And I would contend that that's the point that's being missed if you're treating this as only a simple case of one character making the wrong call at the wrong time. At least, that's how I saw it. Hey gang, here's a question that keeps coming up. If your handle is Movie Bob, where are your movie reviews? Well, my old reviews are in a lot of places. You'll find many of them on my YouTube channel, but you'll find the brand new ones on Geek.com, an awesome site that's also your one-stop news source for science, TV, gaming, technology, nerd culture, the works. You can find all my reviews directly by going to geek.com/author/bchipman, because that's my real name, and you can get regular updates on all my reviews and all of Geek.com's other great content by signing up for their kick-ass newsletter at subscribe.geek.com. And don't forget to also subscribe to the Geek.com YouTube channel, where you'll find the videos that accompany my reviews and tons of other great content too. Remember, that's Geek.com, the Geek.com newsletter, and Geek.com on YouTube. Make sure you don't miss out on all the latest Movie Bob reviews. You can also check out my own new website, Movie Bob Central, where you'll find my blog, links to all my work, and shop for my books, ebooks, and future Movie Bob products. And please remember to like these videos, share them with all of your friends, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching another Movie Bob production.